Okay, welcome back for another episode of No Express Purpose, and this week is special. Firstly, because you can actually see us in addition to being able to hear us. And no, there isn't always a group of 5 people and several staring on silently. This is the first time we've had this many in a room together. And this week is actually has an express purpose, and that is to talk about the upcoming sales tax questions that are coming up next week for McAlester voters. And with me today are several panelists representing different entities who have questions on that ballot. I'm going to go ahead and let Mayor John Brown explain exactly what those questions are.
What we have now is we currently have a 9.5% sales tax in McAlester. Coming up in July, we have 2 quarter cents or 1/2 cent expiring. So the city of McAlester got with the McAlester Regional Health Authority and the McAlester Public Schools and decided to give a referendum to the citizens of McAlester to see what they would like to fund, if anything, with sales tax. The breakdown would be, there's a question of 1/2 cent for infrastructure for the city of McAlester, 1/8 cent for economic development for the city of McAlester, 1/8 cent for early childhood center and safe rooms for McAlester Public Schools, and 1/8 cent to expand the cancer center. If all 4 issues were to pass, and you will vote on each of these separately, there's 4 questions. If all 4 are to pass, the sales tax would increase by 3/8 cent, which if I did the math right, comes down to 37.5 cents per $100 spent. So it's a very little cost for some very great benefit for McAlester, but it is something that we're referring to the citizens to tell us what they want us to do.
And so, just to make sure, what you said, they are individual questions on the ballot.
Yes.
And so someone can say, I think this is a great idea. I think this is a great idea. These 2 I don't support, and vote yes on 2, no on the others. Yes on all 4, no on all 4.
They can. We certainly hope they don't.
All right,
we hope
sure.
they go 4 for 4, all for it.
All right. Okay. So, last week, the City of McAlester Facebook page posted just asking for some questions from the community about specifically this sales tax, anything that they wanted to get more details on, anything they wanted to ask anonymously and have discussed by representative of these taxing entities. We've compiled those, and I'm going to ask them in chunks according to whom they are addressed. We're going to go ahead and start with McAlester Regional Health Center, and we are going to start on this end of the couch. I'm going to have you introduce yourself, why you're representing the hospital for this discussion, what it is exactly that is being proposed with this question, and then I'm going to start asking you some questions. So go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Ryan Gathard, and I am the Foundation Director for McAlester Regional Health Center, and I'm here representing Proposition 3 on the ballot next Tuesday, which 1/8 cent would generate half of what we need to build a new cancer center.
Okay. All right. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. And let's get started with some of the questions that McAlester citizens had about this particular question. Number 1, is the cancer center only a McAlester Regional Health Center, or will there be any type of partnership involved?
The current cancer center is owned by McAlester Regional Health Center. The city, in an effort to attract the cancer center provider, funded with taxes the current facility back in 1999, and OCSRI, abbreviation for Oklahoma Cancer Specialist Research Institute, is the only certified member of the MD Anderson Cancer Network in the state of Oklahoma.
Okay. So would that change with this new cancer center?
It would not. The arrangement would still be the same. We would provide the building, and OCSRI would provide the care as the provider.
Okay, cool. Number 2, if the hospital can borrow and charge for services, why are the citizens asked to fund it? And tag on question, will the citizens get discounted rates?
Well, I'll answer the second one first, because the cancer center service provider is OCSRI. OCSRI, Oklahoma Cancer Specialists and Research Institute is responsible for the billing and rates in the future, as they have been for the last 19 years. To answer your first question, although the hospital can borrow and charge for services, the hospital is also a trust of the city of McAlester, and as a result, the citizens can choose to utilize sales tax as one method of helping the hospital finance and improve the cancer center. Almost all of the upgrades to the hospital, including the $11 million to our new emergency center opening this summer, have been paid entirely by the hospital through its operations without the help of its citizens. The expiration of the 1/2 cent sales tax presents an opportunity to have the citizens and non-citizens that happen to shop, buy gas, or stay at the hotels in McAlester help with the new cancer center. The proposed 1/8 cent sales tax will only fund roughly half of the cost. The rest will be paid for by the hospital through our revenues, which we do not receive from the cancer center, through regular operations or donations to the new center. The cost to a family who spends about $4,000 a month is literally $5 a month, the cost of a Happy Meal, which is a very small cost for expansion of great partnerships and facilities for our future.
Okay, so follow up of my own to that question then would be, what is the McAlester taxpayer going to get out of voting yes for this proposition that they wouldn't get otherwise? So number one, is this potentially a deal breaker for the arrangement? And even if it's not, what does that half of the payment allow McAlester Regional to do or not do differently if they didn't have that money?
That's a great question. And if the vote did not go through, our cancer center would still be providing top-notch care that has been recognized by MD Anderson for being a healthcare industry leader. We'll still provide that care. It'll slow down the process. Currently, we're able to take care of 35% of cancer needs in southeastern Oklahoma. So expanding this cancer center, making it bigger, that will help us to be able to serve more, help us to be able to put more chairs there in the facility, and also give more space for the family, being the caregivers that are there that with the cancer patient.
So it would essentially expedite the process if the taxpayers decided to come alongside the hospital with this funding.
And it also means more people can get their cancer care in McAlester and not have to leave town. And it brings more people to McAlester in order for them to have their care, because we're a regional health center serving 22 counties. And so people already come here for health care. That would bring even more people here for health care, which then affects our economy in a positive way.
You can almost call that economic development.
Mm-hmm. Well, each of these issues in some way or another affects economic development,
you
because
don't get to use a blanket
because everything's economic development.
All right, so we already know your trump card to your questions. Everything's economic development. No. Okay, thank you. We'll get back to that. If number three, if the hospital tax passes, does this ensure that city employees will never be out of network again? Now, this may be referring to some specific arrangement or incident of which I'm not aware, and you may know what's going on.
I can give a little background on that.
Well, I'll answer it first, and we'll see if that clears it up.
If you're right.
Because the city can change their health care coverage in the future, it would be impossible to say that they would never be out of network. However, hospital management is currently working on lowering the costs for the city for many of their health care needs, not just cancer.
Okay.
And I was just going
All right,
to...
where did this question come from? I was going to ask you.
Where did the question come from?
Yeah.
Well, what happened in the past was the insurance carrier for the city of McAlester and that worked through the McAlester Regional Health Center, they changed, in essence, they changed the name of their policy, and that changed the reimbursement rate, where it created a situation where the hospital would essentially lose money by treating people that were in our title versus the title that Blue Cross and Blue Shield had gone to. It was nothing that the hospital did wrong. It was nothing that the city did wrong. It was an insurance company wanting to make more money, essentially.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, this question kind of conflates the cost of the care and the cost of the coverage, which is a whole nother discussion, but definitely separate things there. Number 4, how did the hospital decide, this is kind of a long one and it's a few different questions, but how did the hospital decide that a cancer center expansion is the most important need in our region? How are healthcare leaders addressing issues of mental health, substance abuse, and addiction in our region? The hospital spokesman, I think this is referring to the town hall meeting that we had perhaps, the hospital spokesman stated that Oklahoma will lose 14,000 citizens to cancer in 2018, while OK.gov says 750 to 900,000 Oklahomans are battling substance abuse and addiction issues, most of them without treatment.
Well, we agree that some substance abuse in Oklahoma is a critical situation, and we also believe that the state's defunding of substance abuse agencies, programs, and services is a dire situation and one which the state of Oklahoma must ultimately take a leadership role in to help that situation. We're actually McAlester Regional Health Center, despite the state's refusal to step up, has started several initiatives, including we opened our own geropsych unit last summer. We have a national spokesman and educator in opioid crisis, as well as we created a mental health consortium for our area, for our state. So we do recognize that that is an issue, and we're trying to help that, but we also realize that the state has a responsibility too.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely a very broad problem beyond just the borders of McAlester or Pittsburgh County.
But we have done studies within our hospital, and we have found the decrease of opioid usage by prescribing less.
Okay.
They've done an amazing job with this. Dr. McAlester he's gone around the country lecturing on this to other hospitals and other medical on the program that the hospital put in. That's reduced. I want to say 60%, but I'm not.
He's requested all over the country to speak at different conferences on the work that's been done here in McAlester.
There was a time.
The effect of the treatment and prescription policies on addiction and abuse.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get off on a little bit of a tangent, but on opioids, most specifically, most of the abuse of opioids comes from prescriptions, sure. From somebody getting it from somebody getting addicted to it through the actual genuine use of it.
Right.
Still there's a remarkably high chance of addiction. I think it's 12% the first time that you take it that you can become addicted to it. And so what the hospital has done is they've changed the method of prescribing it, and they've done it simply by educating themselves and educating other doctors on it, and they've reduced the amount that they prescribe tremendously. I think the number I'd heard at one time was they were getting 18, 20 people coming to the emergency room just trying to get pain meds, and that's dropped down to like 3.
So that's that many people who have been affected in a positive way,
sure.
just because of that.
Sure.
So just to kind of tie it into the question,
The
state's cut mental health, cut everything. The state has no money. But the McAlester Hospital has stepped up and initiated programs themselves that are addressing some of those issues.
Right. We're not suggesting to spend money on cancer care at the expense necessarily of programs, and because we see that that's an issue and are actually addressing it, with other policies and
through other methods.
And that's another example of our hospital and our physicians identifying a need and doing what they can to meet the need.
And that came internally?
Meet the crisis, yes, and help the community. That started with one of our physicians and Dr. Jason McAlester.
Cool.
And one of the pharmacists.
Yeah, Dr. Larry, not Dr., but Larry Ald.
Yeah.
The pharmacist Larry Ald.
Awesome. That's good to hear. All right. Bonus information. Coffee time. All right.
No, not.
Welcome back. We've got one more question. We just had a brief coffee break and a refueling episode. Now we have one more question for Ryan before we move on. In an era of consolidation and a decline in municipally owned hospitals, why does McAlester Regional believe expansion of the Cancer Center is a good investment of citizens' taxes?
Well, unfortunately, the consolidation and decline in municipally owned hospitals has resulted in less local care being provided, and this makes it more difficult on both the patient and the caregivers of these patients. But McAlester Regional Health Center is not in the same boat, thankfully. McAlester Regional Health Center is one of the only rural hospitals in Oklahoma that continues to grow and remains very profitable and is continually expanding services and growing in its ability to meet the needs of Southeast Oklahoma. And the expansion and creation of the new emergency center is simply one example of how the MRHC personnel see a need. And this is something that was built without tax dollars 2 years ago when we came to the vote of the people. And so the last time we came to the vote of the people was in 1999 for a sales tax, and that built this cancer center that's currently serving 35% of Southeast Oklahoma's cancer needs, which is over 1,300 unique patients in 1 year last year. So that's serving a lot of people, keeping a lot of people in McAlester, and bringing a lot of people to McAlester. In addition, statistically, 1 in 4 people will be affected by cancer.
He's pointing at you. You're the one.
It could be any of us. You just never know. It has no respecter of persons. The ability to provide quality cancer care locally without requiring our citizens to drive out of the area to receive treatment is a great benefit to our citizens and their caregivers as well. It's not just the patient receiving the care, it's their caregiver driving them to and from. And if it's out of town, your whole day is shot. And if you have to go back the next day, you have a whole nother day shot. So there's a lot of burdens that people take on when they're dealing with the cancer diagnosis. So to be able to keep people in town where they can go home right after their cancer care and be closer to home if they don't live right in McAlester, that is a big deal. And local certified MD Anderson Cancer Network, which is the industry noticed standard in healthcare through OCSRI, is an amazing benefit, a great provider that we have to the people of Southeast Oklahoma, and it's available right here in McAlester.
It's pretty awesome. So, I mean, I think that the observation that consolidation is happening, decline in municipally owned hospitals is happening. Would you say that this cancer center, maybe even the ER that's being added onto right now, is or could be a bid to be one of the hospitals that things get consolidated towards instead of, ending up being absorbed into something else, being sort of becoming more of a regional hub, or how does that play into what is obviously a trend across the state? Is that part of this conversation at all?
Well, when you talk about our name, the first word in our name is McAlester. So we're focusing on our home base and to make sure our citizens are taken care of. The second word in our name is regional. So we want to act like a regional health center. So we see that the health needs of the other 22 counties that we serve are not being adequately met. So we want to be able to meet those needs. So the more services that we are able to provide here without people having to drive a full 2 hours away, that's a big deal to be able to have that here. So the more services we're able to bring here and more we're able to expand, that attracts more physicians, that attracts more people, and that makes McAlester a better place to live.
Sure. All right. You guys, cross-panel, any other questions to tag on here?
I know my dad is on his 3rd bout of prostate cancer, and they live in Pittsburgh County, and it was the 2nd round of treatment. He had to drive 37 work days in a row to Tulsa to get radiation. Wow. Because that's where it was offered. So Monday through Friday, 37 days in a row, him and my mom, who was his caregiver because she had to drive him home. And that would have been wonderful. I mean, they live, much, much closer, living here in Pittsburgh County to McAlester, and he would have loved to have not taken an entire day, 37 days in a row. luckily he's got a wonderful employer that just let him, have a sabbatical until the whole process was done. But not everyone gets that.
Yeah.
And that's a perfect example of why this is needed, because the more space we have, the more care we can provide. And that prevents people that live in McAlester from having to leave McAlester to get the cancer care that they need.
I mean, it was close to a 2-hour drive up there and 2-hour drive back. And the radiation itself didn't take long, but it was still an entire day.
It's a big part
for, yeah.
And just
Almost
on the
7 weeks.
business side of it, it's an economic driver for McAlester because we are the medical hub. We've got the hospital, we have the clinic, we have Carl Albert Mental Health Center, we have Eastern, which has an RN program. We've got Kaimashi, Votech, which I know it's not called Votech anymore, but they have an LPN.
Career Tech.
Yeah, Career Tech, and they have an LPN program. The McAlester Regional has gone out to the surrounding areas and have feeder systems built that will be bringing people here. And, medically and economic development, those are the great kind of jobs that you want. You want people coming here that are doctors and RNs and have, a lot of disposable income. Sure. And Kirk can address that better than I can.
Healthcare is definitely one of our target industries that we look at when we're thinking about growing McAlester, and not just in terms of the service side of things, but in what could we be producing that kind of ties into that. Could we get healthcare providers that are building different supplies? Could we recruit those to the area? So having the healthcare, having the hospital in this area is definitely an asset for us. It is odd to think about. Just the mindset's different for McAlester. When you think about going to the next community, for like the next tier community, you leave for Tulsa. Mm-hmm. For a lot of communities in southeast Oklahoma, the next tier is McAlester.
Right.
Of course, that kind of leads to the argument of those people leaving. How do you get them here? I mean, Adam, you and I both grew up here. How many times have you heard someone complain about the hospital doesn't offer these services? Well, how do you get those services?
Right.
It takes money.
Sure.
And if you kind of talking about it as a target industry, if you exclude MacApp, it's certainly our largest single employer. But if you exclude MacApp, our second and largest employment sector and second largest employer is healthcare and McAlester Regional.
Sure.
It's definitely a large part of our economy, and I certainly support ways that creative ways we can expand on that when possible.
Sure. Awesome. All right, you guys went pretty easy on him. Maybe he'll return the favor later. So we're going to move on to thank you for all that information. We're going to move on to talking about the Early Childhood Center. Chad, go ahead and tell us who you are, what we're discussing here as a proposition, and then I'm going to grill you.
Well, I'm Chad Gregg. I'm the business manager and the treasurer for McAlester Public Schools. I've been an administrator here for the last 5 years at the high school and the early childhood level, actually. Our sales tax, I mean, we've done a lot of research into what would make the most impact sustainable, in a kid's education and for future, and that's early childhood education. And so what we're proposing to do is to build an early childhood center that would house our pre-K, kindergarten, and first grade all in one place for a number of different reasons. One reason is that we've grown out of where we're at right now. I mean, we've got classrooms that are, full to the rim with a number of kids and no extra space. I mean, the old stage areas in our early childhood centers are teachers' lounges and libraries, and there's no room. Couple that with the fact that those buildings were built in the 50s, and before technology, before central heat and air. I mean, they have old boiler systems. They have asbestos insulation that that would take a lot of money to replace or to remove. Yeah. That have 2 outlets in the room because they're built in the 50s. There wasn't a whole call for kids to be having iPads or having computers because they didn't exist then. And another large reason, for those buildings is that they're impossible. They're grandfathered in, but it would be outrageous to get them up to the codes that exist in McAlester right now and in the state of Oklahoma with fire suppression, and and everything. Our high school building right now is the only building that we have that's not grandfathered in, and we've spent about $70,000 in the last 2 years getting it up to code. So
with fire suppression or what?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And not just the suppression system, but it has to tie in, to notify the fire department. So, I mean, security and fire, the actual pipes that contain the water. It also has to have all the electrical components to notify all the powers that be if something were to happen.
Right. So that you actually kind of touched on these a little bit.
That was my idea, to try to answer as many questions.
Yeah, right. We're done with that one. We'll move on. Let me read through these and we'll see if there's anything that you can expound on. One question says, does the school really believe building a large building like that is in the best interest of the district and the kids? Another one, how did the school district decide the funding priority is an early childhood center? Upon what research is the idea of grade level centers based, and where can citizens find it? So let's talk about those. We do have this would consolidate students from that are currently in how many different locations?
It would consolidate 5 down to 2.
5 down to 2. Now,
so I mean, those are buildings that are, like I said, built in the 50s, that are not well insulated,
right.
that that are not efficient systems right now, not efficient buildings.
So if I'm coming in and I'm saying, just from a very general level, why is that a good idea? Consolidation in terms of both, physical space, but also in terms of the level of education, the quality of education. What data? And they asked, this person asked, what data or research is there that supports
Sure.
this, and where can citizens find it? Why do that?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. I mean, for early childhood, you can Google effects of early childhood education and there's hundreds of studies that show, but mainly it comes down to 2 large components. One is that transitions that a kid makes, when they make a transition, and when we talk about a transition, we talk about going from one building to another.
Sure.
So that's really what that means, because everyone knows kids go from grade to grade. But making those transitions, kids lose a little bit, and you have to gain that back. They lose a little bit of that knowledge. They lose a little bit of their, the positive effects of their education, because they have to relearn, new kids, new teachers, new principals, new protocols, I mean, they've got new rules to new buildings, and those, you have to take that step back and then forward again. So you're playing catch up for the first weeks, and so you can minimize those transitions.
Okay.
I mean, there's actually 2 different studies. This one was from the Journal of Research and Development and Education. I mean, definitely the conclusion of the overall study was that, the results of this study indicate that a decline in achievement during the transition year can be expected for all the grade spans studied in the schools, that convert from self-contained classrooms. That was, again, like I said, that's the Journal of Research and Development and Education. Here's one from the Regional Education Laboratory that states the more grade levels that a school services, the better students perform. The more transitions a student makes, the worse the student performs. The longer the student stays in a given school, the better the student performs. So that's from the Research of Educational Laboratory.
In a given school, like given location.
Yes.
Right.
Ideally, if, in this area, if we had, say, 2 K-8 schools that fed McAlester, then that would be ideal. We would love that. But we can't house that. We can't facilitate that. So doing the best with what we have would be starting right now with early childhood education. Right now our kids go to pre-K in one building, go to kindergarten in a second building, and then go 1st through 4th in one of 3 elementaries. Mm-hmm. So we would condense all 3 of those grades to one area.
Yeah.
So that gives us, that helps with that transition, and it also helps with vertically and horizontally aligning our curriculum. Those grade centers where we've got all of our best teachers all in the same area. They're all collaborating with each other. The kindergarten teachers are telling the pre-K teachers, this is what kids need to know for our class. And likewise with 1st grade, instead of those being across town, they're across the hall or they're in a different wing. And so we can streamline and a lot better educate kids where they have more and lasting, positive effects in their education. And likewise, when we do that, that would let us, since we have less grades, put all of our second, third, and fourth in the same area so that we wouldn't just be streamlining those transitions for that age group. We want to do that for every age group. We don't want kids to go one grade at one building and then go to the next grade at a different building,
Right.
and learn all the new teachers' names and all the new customs and the new principles, rules and
cafeteria flow.
Exactly.
And, yeah, sure. So I think, that makes sense and addresses the kind of argument for the quality of the education and just the quality of the daily flow, for kids and the lack of transitions. A second part of one of those questions is sort of a question. You do not have the funds to maintain what you currently have. How do you plan on managing that? And to me, that is in part a question about how does this affect potentially the overhead, whether that's that going from heating and cooling and doing maintenance in 5 old buildings to 1 new building, to if you consolidate, how does that change your personnel costs? Where's the economic factor of that, and how does that maybe address this question about maintaining?
I don't know who wrote that question that said we don't have the funds to maintain, because I don't know where they.
There, right?
I don't. That's a large assumption to make. Of course, we do have the money to maintain those buildings because we're doing it right now, or they would be closed right now.
Okay,
but what we don't do, being good stewards of taxpayers' money, is invest a lot of money into buildings where taxpayers aren't going to get a return. We're going to keep buildings safe, but right now, and we say, we could go and dump hundreds of thousands of dollars and not have any money left over, but we're in a very volatile time in education funding right now. And so protecting people's jobs and keeping kids safe is our number one priority. Upgrading from a boiler system that we could pay a few thousand a year to keep running and just keep that thing trucking along, or go buy a brand new $150,000 heat and air system, we're not going to do that before that becomes our last resort. Because our kids don't deserve that, and we want our kids to be, have their best chance at success, and we know that this is it. We know this is a start, and there are a lot of other, like you said, maintaining one big building, one nice new energy efficient building, I can imagine is going to be costing less than keeping 3 65-year-old plus buildings, that
moderately comfortable.
Yeah, keeping them up and running.
Sure.
That that are not insulated, that are not equipped for what buildings can do today.
Okay, so on the financial side, and you don't get it quite as easy here as his question because the hospital does get to make money off things. One of the questions was, the school proposes a $15 million building. This tax would generate $7.5 million. Is the school going to scale it back, or are we throwing good money after bad? Why is it so high? And I guess I'll ask the implied there, where's the other half going to come from? Well,
absolutely. This was always intended to be seed money, to be a foundation. That's why there's more than just Plan A. This is not an all or bust thing for the school. But, and I'll get into that in just a second. But absolutely, our intention is to go after a bond and to try to seek a very small, compared to what it would be, ad valorem bond to supplement the remaining portion that needed to be financed. And I know the dollar amounts look, and I think that was part of the question maybe originally that we could circle back to. The construction cost for a school, it's not like going, if I want to go build a building out there. I mean, number one, making them safe rooms is a substantially larger cost. Sure. Number two, all these codes that we're talking about with fire suppression and all these things, there are kids involved. There are different standards that schools have to adhere to with construction, and that costs more. I mean, that pushes the construction cost up to $200 to $300 a square foot. And at the same time, when you talk about the financing of that bond, when we talk about bonding against a sales tax or bonding against a different, property tax bond, when you do that, you not only have to cover all of the financing cost or all of the construction costs at the time or in the next year or two and kind of forecast what those might rise to, but you also have to bond against all of the future financing costs, all of the interest, because all that is going to get levied against taxpayers. We can't have a plan to do construction without having a plan to pay the money back in a timely manner. So, and that's, it's like if you went and borrowed money, to buy your house,
just goes up and up.
Yeah, you don't go borrow money. It'd be like borrowing all the money to finance a house and then having to say, well, what's the total amount of interest we're going to pay back in 30 years? Right. I got to borrow that much money because that's what has to be levied. And everyone knows, I mean, you go buy a $100,000 house, you're going to pay $250,000 at the end of 30 years, depending on the interest rate, which, it's not to that scale because as a municipal bond, that's wonderful money that people want to borrow and we can get a very good rate at that, but it's still a substantial amount of money that's just financing costs because there's going to be some bank out there that's going to front all that money up front and it's going to take us years, the taxpayers years, to pay it back, and there's a cost to that.
Well, and so I think, could you say then that $7.5 million up front raised with the sales tax could actually be, it's worth more in terms of what it would have had to be if you had bonded it? Right.
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, I mean, you're talking about the having to cover the financing costs in what's levied in an ad valorem bond, right? But if you have to get a bond for less because you were able to raise half of the cost per.
Oh, absolutely.
You're getting more bang for your buck because you're not having to pass on those financing costs in the same way.
Yes, they're not going to be levied against the people around here. They're not going to be levied against their property tax because this sales tax, for one, it's not just property owners. It's everybody that will be sharing in that cost. Two, it's going to be people that don't even live in this town. They're going to be helping pay that cost. Right. And those things are big. And another thing is, it's not just going to be people in the sales tax that reside in McAlester School District, but just doesn't even encompass the entire town. It's going to be people, that all over this area, inside and outside of McAlester School District, they're going to be helping pay to improve McAlester schools.
Your base is much broader than it would be with.
Yes. Well, there's none of McAlester School Districts that's even on Highway 69. Right. But that represents a fairly substantially large sales tax base for the city of McAlester, and those people in that area, I mean, that would help fund McAlester schools.
Sure. Let's see. Last part here for you. What measures has the district taken to engage stakeholders in the decision-making process to determine this funding priority? Well,
there've been a lot of talk and a lot of research, and a lot of that's been done by people in education. It's been done by administrators. But in addition to that, there have been committees that we've talked to. There have been meetings that Mr. Hughes has had with teachers, surveys that we've put out to parents and to teachers. And there's also been a lot of discussion that we've had throughout the last several months at several school board meetings where we've just introduced this as discussion items and have invited people, that can at any time, sign up and speak and give their opinion, positive or negative, in a public forum for our Board of Education to be able to hear.
Sure.
So, I mean, we've advertised it, like I said, internally, externally through social media.
Right.
And a lot of kind of like this roundtable discussions with stakeholders, formally and informally. And there's been a lot of that. But the guiding force of that has also been through best practice research. I mean, we're an education facility. That's what we do. We look at what's best practice in education. I mean, educators are always, we're full of lifelong learners. And that's been a primary source of how we want to be guided into the future, is do what's best for kids.
Sure.
Just to put it in plain English for people, is they would like to build a $15 million building. If they were to have to finance through a bond that entire amount of money, it would kick it up to 20 million, or kick it up. It's significant cost.
Millions of dollars.
Yes.
That make the difference of millions.
Yeah. So if they can fund half of it with the sales tax and then bond the other $7.5 million, you're cutting their borrowing cost way down. It's much better for the school to handle that, a smaller debt than that, and it's better for the citizens. If the bond issue would be shorter.
It'd be less levied against property
I was going
owners.
to say it's particularly better for property owners in the district.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And McAlester has 3 different school districts within it, so that's why it's very difficult to pass a bond issue here, because somebody living here will have to pay, whereas this person over here wouldn't.
I mean, our school district ends at Douglas. It ends, before you get to 69.
Yeah.
We have 4 dependent school districts that border us, and 1 independent. We're really 2, but I mean, there's a lot of interest around in the city of McAlester. And one thing that, I guess circling back, that we didn't talk about, if something were to happen and this were to pass and a bond were not to pass, the reason the worded, it's worded the way it is because our contingency plan to make sure that we get every penny benefit students would be to install safe rooms in as many of those schools as we can. Because like I say, these schools being built in the 50s and the early 60s, they don't have safe rooms. If a large tornado came through here, it would be just the cinder block that was installed 60 years ago that would be right between them and a tornado, and we don't like that. Sure. So and when we build a new early childhood center, obviously it will contain safe rooms.
Right.
But that's what we would use with the money if we weren't able to do an early childhood center. It would still go to benefit as many kids as we could and keep as many kids as we can safe.
So is that contingency, is that in the language of the?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. It's to construct an early childhood center and or safe rooms for McAlester Public Schools.
Got it.
And you're just not trying to obtain a sales tax for a building. You're going after a sales tax for the future of McAlester, because this will greatly benefit the kids.
Absolutely.
Which is the future of McAlester.
There are a number of studies too that show, if a child is reading on grade level by 3rd grade, they're 75% more likely to graduate high school than a child that's behind 1 to 2 standard deviations behind. Wow. I mean, getting kids early and getting those habits. I mean, those social and cognitive skills and a lot of other benefits to early childhood education sets a foundation and a precedent that helps for much longer term success than people think.
Well, it is long-term success. I mean, there's not really a lot of short-term gains from education investments. You're talking about 20 years out, you start to see the improvement.
Well, certainly.
And education kind of is your long-term economic development strategy. Workforce is kind of, when you think about
we are the workforce in 15 or 20 years.
That's what I mean. That's what I'm trying to say is when industries, they rank what is important to them, what they need to be able to be successful in any given place. And consistently, at least within the recent history, workforce is the number one thing. If you don't have the workforce base that they need, they're not locating in your community. Sure. So when you think
makes a lot of sense.
It does. So when you think about how do you grow McAlester in the way that you need it, the way that we want it to, what pieces do you need? Education ultimately is a big piece of it. It may be the long range vision of it. It's not like if we build this next year, we'll have the workforce that we need. But 20 years down the road, it'll certainly contribute to that.
Well, these kids are future doctors, future nurses at McAlester Regional. They're future people that are going to be working on the streets and in the water, in the water systems, and helping with economic development.
So we just had a meter leak at one of up at S Arch, and it was 2 kids that had just graduated high school that I was their assistant principal that come up, and they were wonderful helping us, getting out and find the shutoff valves and stuff, and they did great. I mean, there are a lot of alumni and a lot of walks of life around here. Sure. And it is. I mean, it is. This is the workforce, like it or not. So, I've always been of the mind that if you're not willing to invest back in your own community, in your own place, then who else do you expect to do it? I mean, if you're not willing to do it yourself, and I've been a part of other school districts where we've passed bonds, and when I was a part of that community, and it's, I mean, my theory behind it is some good things require sacrifice, but you can't expect people in Oklahoma City or people in Washington, D.C. to say, we want to put McAlester number one. You know, especially if people at McAlester don't want to step up and do it. You know, and I think there are an enormous amount of wonderful people here that do want to do that, and everybody that's sitting here just wants to find the way they want to do that, the way we want. I mean, engaging people and say, how can we best serve you? How can we best serve our community?
Sure.
You know, this is not, all of us are sitting here are public servants.
It's a question of how, not of
exactly.
if.
It's not like, you know, hey, we want to bend you to our will. You know, we put a lot of time and effort into saying what's going to make the most and best impact, and, you know, long after we're gone.
Sure.
And each of us saw over the past 2 weeks, unfortunately, the Patterson 219 incident happened 2 weeks ago today, and we have seen over $110,000 come in through fundraising. It was more than just McAlester, but predominantly McAlester fundraising. So McAlester, when it's been met with a challenge, McAlester people rise to the challenge to support others. And this is another example. There's a challenge.
Sure.
Absolutely. I mean, I live here. I pay taxes here. I shop here. I mean, this is not something that, you know, that excludes any of us.
Sure.
I mean, but for me, all of these questions, I'll be voting yes on all of them because I feel like it's a willful sacrifice, and it's a minimum sacrifice. But the potential gain outweighs the loss exponentially. You know, I mean, and there's a reason that there are, you know, proverbs that say, you know, one generation plants a tree so the other can receive the shade.
Sure.
We're not doing this so that we can all sit in the shade. We're doing this so our next generation can sit in the shade. Just like the generation that built these schools and these hospitals in the 50s and 60s. They saw that need then because at that time they were built in the teens and 20s. And I've heard that several times. Well, that school was good enough for me when I went there in the 60s and 70s. Well, that's because it was new. That's because someone saw that need and filled it while you were in elementary school.
Right, yeah.
Of course it worked. It was the best they had to offer at the time. You know? And now that time is over. You
These
know?
kids now deserve the same thing.
Exactly.
Well, and you're talking about, we've talked through, you know, 2 of the 4 in terms of what really is in the question, what is at stake, and back to, you know, John mentioned at the beginning, we're talking about $100 sale,
37 and a half cents on $100.
And so you say it's a sacrifice, and even in terms of a sacrifice, it's a
Yes.
fairly affordable one if you look at it in those terms.
And it's one that would be shared by everyone.
Sure.
You know, everyone that drives through here, everyone that shops here, whether you own a home or not, however it is, you know. And I think that's a wonderful thing, you know.
That is one of the unique pieces of sales taxes is your trade area does contribute to whatever you're funding. For McAlester, we have a pretty high pull factor is what I think the technical definition for it. It's 2, which for those who don't really understand what that means is for a city our size, we would be expected to produce X amount of sales tax, but we're producing double that. We're
Which is all
effectively
coming from,
correct from a trade area surrounding McAlester, which a trade area or a pull factor of 2 kind of indicates that we're really producing twice as much sales tax as you might expect for a city our size, which is fairly large for the state of Oklahoma. So you're absolutely correct when you say that this is being paid for by more than just the residents of McAlester. This is anyone who travels or anyone who's in kind of the area that surrounds us that does their shopping in McAlester. It's more than just the residents of McAlester.
Or anybody
that
who
pays
comes
for
here
this.
for their medical care. They're going to use our stores. They're going to use our gas stations. They may even stay in our hotels. And that's only good and makes McAlester a better McAlester.
So
Absolutely.
Vote for these if you want people who don't live here to pay for our cool stuff, right?
Absolutely.
With some help from the people that live here.
Oh yeah.
Half
Yeah.
apparently.
Yeah.
Approximately half.
Well, that is wonderful because the people, I mean, all around this area, they drive through this town. They use our streets. They use our, you know,
Sure, yeah.
Our fire departments help when they need to go out and. I mean, there's a lot of resources
Sure,
that
yeah.
people come here, but they also use.
Yeah,
So,
I'm not saying you don't get the benefit of the
No, I know.
services or the whatever, but I think it's important to mention how broad our base is compared to what just McAlester is. All right, you passed, Chad. You made it through.
Okay.
Now you get to go on offense.
Now I get to prod. I can prod for the rest of the time.
We're going to move on to infrastructure and
Yes, I just didn't want to go last. I don't want to be the one stuck there.
Well, we've already established that everything's economic
So
development.
what a better way to tie it all up.
We'll have covered it all by the time we get there. So we're going to talk infrastructure. So give us an overview of what that question's about, and then we'll jump in.
The question is just in a nutshell is we're asking for half a cent to use exclusively for infrastructure. The city of McAlester, that's roads, water, wastewater.
Okay. What is half a cent in terms of annual projection?
It's about $2 million.
$2 million a year.
And to put that into perspective, we currently spend about $500,000. Actually, it's less than that. It's about $400,000, $450,000
On things that would be
on what
in this.
just when this passes, what it'll cover.
Okay. All right. Let's jump in. How will the city decide whether to prioritize streets or water when both needs are dire? Okay, so that's one question. What federal and state assistance are city leaders seeking before we end up like Flint? I'm assuming Michigan.
Yeah, there's no chance that we're going to end up like Flint.
Okay,
I
great.
think there was some actual deliberate moves on there, or deliberate, not moves, deliberate admissions.
There you go.
That are not going to happen in the city of McAlester.
The citizens of McAlester will never spend enough money in our town to generate the revenue required to fund these projects. Another assumption there. What other solutions, i.e. funding sources, are being sought? So you kind of have the two there. Are we looking for other funding sources, assuming that, hey, the need is too great than what we could ever raise in sales tax or property tax or something? And then how will we decide whether to prioritize streets or water or whatever else might be covered here?
Well, the city 3 or 4 years ago had a company come in and have done a survey of every street in McAlester, and they've all been rated and prioritized for need and use.
Okay.
We don't have that for the water system or the wastewater system. In fact, we don't even have a map.
I was going to say that'd be kind of difficult to
Yeah.
even assess, probably.
Yeah, especially we don't even have a map of where everything is. We don't know where all of the valves are, and we had one guy that took care of this for quite a number of years, and he retired, and he's passed away. So a lot of times what happens when we have to fix these things, a lot of time is spent just trying to find them from where you can turn it off.
No institutional memory there.
Right.
So we have taken some measures to prevent that. We finally got GIS, and we are slowly implementing all of that data into a computer, which will be available regardless of who retires.
Yeah, sure.
It shouldn't be lost.
Yeah, but you're
again.
having to rebuild that.
In a lot of cases,
now.
yes.
Right. And that's one of the things that we would need to, we could use this money for, is to get that system in place. So we don't currently have it. As far as the immediate, probably the first thing that we would do would be the bypass of the old water plant out there, because we had the catastrophic failure that we had was because, for whatever reason, when they built the new water plant, which is 36 years ago, so it's kind of
new.
Yeah, oxymoronic.
We have new schools.
You've got new schools, that's right.
That's how old our new school is.
Our water plant was state of the art when your schools were new. But they ran it through that, and there's not even where the old one was. Building it, there's not a building there. There's nothing, and that was always so remarkably difficult to find it. When they did find it and tried to shut it down, somebody had welded the valve open so it couldn't be shut down. And it's it's old.
We'll never need this.
Yeah. This will never break.
That's right. That's what you're assuming there, I guess.
And of course, whenever that was new, that's probably what they thought.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's the old infrastructure, so we've got to go around it, and the cost to do that's estimated at about $600,000.
Okay.
So refer back to what I said earlier. We currently spend about $450,000 for the
So
entire
a year and
city
a
for
half.
everything.
Right. Yeah.
So we would be. This is $150,000 more than we spend on the entire city.
Got it.
Just to fix that one issue. And we don't have any shortage of needs, obviously. Anybody that drives the streets, or we've had a lot of water breaks and water problems. What this will do is it'll fix some of the problems that we currently have. It'll help us to replace and bypass some of the old infrastructure. And most importantly, it'll give us money to work on the things that are going to happen in the future, because with the infrastructure we have, we would be foolish to think that things aren't going to break. Because, I mean, some of it is literally 100 years old. You know, and Pete was telling me, the city manager, that one time they dug down and they found where there were actually some wooden pipes that were in there, and I've never heard of that.
You say wooden pipes?
Wood, yeah.
I didn't even know that was ever a thing.
I didn't either, and
It's like Greece or something.
Colonial.
yeah, you know, may have been an old settlement or something. It could be archaeologically important now.
Right,
But
You might be in trouble.
but yeah, like, you know,
We'll leave that part. We'll do some research and then maybe delete that part.
yeah.
Make sure he's not in trouble.
But the prioritizing is that we have that for the streets. We need to even just find out where all our water and wastewater systems are. We will prioritize those, and we're in the situation where, you know, it's emergency management, and so as far as saying this is what we're going to do here, this is what we're going to do here, and this is what we're going to do here, that's what we would hope we could do, but realistically, a lot of this will be when we have a water break. I saw one today over on Wyandotte that when they go down, instead of putting a clamp on it to fix it, you know, fix a 50-year-old pipe, they can replace the section of pipe, so you don't have the problem again in the future.
Perpetuating Band-Aids.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, sure.
It'll, you know, there's dilapidation going on, and it's going to continue to go on if we don't do something about it.
Well, so, okay, that's part of the question that's not on here, but that I've heard numbers-wise and thought about. You know, we're talking about adding almost $2 million a year to the funding for infrastructure. Is that even enough for us to catch up?
No.
Okay.
No. It's enough to let us fall less further behind.
Well, and this is a problem nationwide. It's not unique in McAlester, but
absolutely.
I mean, I was recently having a conversation with someone, and they kind of, their thought on it was, it's not fair that you're asking us to do this now. It's too much. And in a way it is, because, and again, not unique to McAlester, but we're really paying for the sins of the past. And not the past 5 years or the past 10 years, but the past 100 years.
Sure.
We have prioritized building new over maintaining what we have for a long time. And it's incredibly unfortunate that we've arrived at the point where we can't kick the can down the road anymore.
Okay.
Things are breaking.
Yeah.
And more than roads, I mean, everyone is definitely concerned about roads, and I am too, but our water and sewer, once it breaks, it goes from working to not working.
Right.
A road can degrade quite a bit before you can't drive on it. It's not pleasant, but you can.
Sure.
So it's
I think enough to even, you know, the History Channel has a series called The Crumbling of America, where they address issues like this in all areas, especially when it comes to utility uses, water, you know, reservoirs, roads, all those things nationwide. It is epidemic. I mean, a lot of the infrastructure for America was the result of WPA projects. You know, right after the Great Depression,
So-
the 30s and 40s, and that's the same infrastructure that we've been spoiled on to be drinking clean water and driving on paved streets, or even brick that they used, where people still drive on.
Yeah, we still have some WPA drain structures.
wow.
in
You can see some on like second and third, you know, around there by Wyandotte and up, where you can see where they just paved over. It's still the brick street
Yeah.
where they just paved over it.
It's underneath here. We had a leak recently out.
And like it's lasted a long time.
Building over here, and when they dug it up, I mean, it's almost immaculate underneath there, underneath the asphalt.
We're talking about stuff that's like pre-World War II
Right.
infrastructure, and that's our primary source of clean water and transportation and sewage removal. What separates us from what caused the Black Plague?
so.
Hopefully.
I agreed with her that it was not
Pass
fair.
this tax or you get cholera.
I agreed with her that it wasn't fair.
We're a few steps from the Black Plague.
This is a depressing podcast. So I agree with her that it
Only
wasn't fair,
if you vote
but
yes.
it not being fair doesn't suddenly make it the problem go away.
Yeah. I mean, you can say it's not fair and then just keep passing it off, and then it's going to be even less fair to.
Well, I don't know if we can anymore.
And yeah, and that's the question. I think is you know, can we drown less with $2 million more a year, but eventually what does this even look like in the large scale? And this isn't necessarily related to this specific sales tax, but the Piper's, calling for a lot of this country, and a lot of the overconsumption and overbuilding and overexpanding that we've done for decades and decades. And the good money after bad, I don't necessarily think that that's what another $2 million towards infrastructure is. But I do think that, that prioritization of what can we actually salvage here realistically in the next 30 years, how much can we actually produce here that's going to be able to save what exists? Because we can't delude ourselves into thinking that we can continue to build and maintain the way we have for
overconsume.
centuries. Yeah.
We've been over-consuming resources.
And if it's not addressed, you saw it happen the last time we had a major water problem. There was a couple days where people didn't have water, and that affects the schools. That affected our hospital. I mean, the churches were closed on Sunday because there was no running water. It affects the restaurants, and it's the economy that
virtually all the restaurants were closed for a while.
Again,
which means I had to cook dinner.
Economic development, clean water,
Absolutely,
running water.
It certainly is.
And when people are looking to bring their business here, that's one of the things they're looking at.
Well, infrastructure and transportation capacity is certainly those are certainly economic development pieces of it. If you don't have a way of moving your goods, if you don't have a way of getting people to your business, if you can't support either electric or natural gas or water or sewer, if you can't support those the required capacities, they can't do business here and make a profit. Now, obviously, every business has different levels that they require, and if you may be able to get this one, but not that one. But it is
we're
definitely
talking about the level of like carbon-based life forms. Let's start here. We need to exist. Clean water,
right?
No
Clean water.
bubonic plague.
Yeah,
you need workers that aren't sick.
we're low on the list on Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
We're looking for those basic
survival.
Yeah.
But the impression that you give as a city as well is with our roads, if somebody's coming here with the idea of investing and they see the roads and they don't know anything about the financial history or anything like that, they're going to think this city doesn't want to put the effort in to fix the roads. Something that kind of ties in a little bit where we are unique as far as our infrastructure and our tax base is we don't have a revenue problem. Our revenue is we get 3.5 cents of the 9.5 cents. The other goes to the county and the state. The problem we have is of that 3.5 cents, 1.5 cents of it goes directly to bond payments.
Yeah, we have a debt problem.
Yeah, it was a debt that was ran up and started in 1999. We have to pay on it till 2034. At one time it was 160 million, and now we're down to somewhere between 50 and 80 million, and that we got to continue. Like I said, we got to continue to pay on that till 2034. So we're operating the city on 2 cents, and that's going to have an effect on everything you do as a city. If 3/7 or that's like 42%, I think, of our sales tax now currently goes to bond debt, and that's another reason to think about what the school would have to do had they had to do a $15 million bond versus a $7.5 million bond.
Right.
You got your borrowing now for the future. Unfortunately, when they borrowed this, they overextended themselves, in my opinion, and put us in a position that for 30 years, we're not going to be able to do the things that need to be done just to maintain the status quo, much less improve the city.
I mean, you're talking about if you have a $1,000 paycheck, you're talking about $400 or something like that going straight to credit card payments or something.
Yeah,
like
for
that.
something
for
that
30 years
that you no longer benefit from.
Right. Yeah.
It's like moving into a house and paying someone else's mortgage.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like buying a house and buying the debt of the person that had the house before you.
Yes.
Right.
But
Okay, so on that note, and we touched a little bit, but what other solutions or funding sources are being sought? And I think the question there is specifically about outside funding.
yeah, well, the state has no money. The state's in horrible shape. They've had a huge deficit last year that they're still doing a special session to try to address, which I don't know what happens when the new session starts and they haven't finished the past session.
Right.
But they haven't done anything to remedy that, so the next session isn't going to be any better. So there's no.
We pay them a per diem to go back up there and do a special session again, like we did last fall, I guess.
So there's no money at the state level available.
Yeah. You're pretty desperate if you're asking the state government of Oklahoma for money.
Yeah.
So maybe that's not our funding mechanism that we look at.
So the next level is the federal government.
We could declare a natural disaster. We just got to let it get worse.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I hadn't worked for Flint, right? Yeah. So the federal government, they've done away with earmarks. They did away with that, 8 or 10 years ago. So you no longer can have your senator or your congressman say, all right, I'll vote for this bill, but I need $20 million for McAlester, Oklahoma. So there's nothing available up there anymore. There may be some grants, but they're few and far between, and it's just not a way. You can't. You're not going to be able to do it. Essentially, I mean, it's like it would be lucky if you could.
Yeah.
And then the only other method,
scratching lottery tickets for
exactly.
city.
There's no guarantee you're going to get the grant.
Yeah.
Sure.
So everyone else is going for after that same money.
Yeah, there's thousands of McAllisters.
Right. I mean, even if you do get the grant, it doesn't solve the issue of having a dedicated revenue source to maintaining things. You can get the one-time lump sum payment to fix something, but the maintenance issue is still there. You need to make sure that you have funding available for when the new street you just built becomes
You still have that
crumbled.
many lane miles. You still have that much pipe under the ground. Right. It doesn't change that stuff. And this next question I think you already kind of addressed, but why does the city not use this infrastructure issue for an opportunity for a new water plant instead of a general maintenance for all infrastructure? You kind of touched on how rerouting away from the old plant would be one of the priorities there, but I guess a new water plant, is that something that's...
Well, a new water plant, you're talking $20 million. Okay? That is an incredible amount of money. And even if it produced the greatest water in the world, if we had people from Paris saying, we don't want Evian anymore, we want this water, we're still piping it through 100-year-old infrastructure.
Right.
So you're essentially you're drinking clean water through a dirty straw.
Right.
Yeah. So, and if we had,
let's make the cup cleaner. Let's make the cup cleaner.
Yeah. And so it'd be nice to have. And our water problems don't stem from the functioning of our water plant. We did a few years back. We were under some consent orders, and all of that has been. We invested quite a bit of money. I believe it was around $4 million over a period of time to get it up to standard. So it's at the lifespan of a water plant, but $20 million to build a new one without having any money for infrastructure, we're still going to have the same problems that we have right now.
Yeah, I mean, it may be at its lifespan, but our other infrastructure is like 2 or 3 times its lifespan.
Yeah.
So okay,
we're in the Walking Dead phase of infrastructure.
The Drinking Dead.
Yeah.
Okay, so last one I think here. Does the city have any plans to look at the way it is building and the way it does things with maintenance and roads, and how can it reduce costs there first? I think that's sort of in line with what I was asking earlier about like long-term and trying to maintain something that's unmaintainable. Clearly, we do not have the funds to maintain what we have, and raising taxes isn't going to fix that. I mean, you guys read that the same way I'm reading it.
Yeah. I don't agree with it, but
okay.
Yeah.
So how do you disagree with that?
Well, because McAllister's been the same population since I think 1960. It's fluctuated maybe 100, 200 here or there. So we're pretty solid on what our tax base is going to be. If we want to have new revenue, we have to build. We have to have something that is going to produce that revenue. So, for instance, if the 14th Street Shopping Center were to come in, okay, it would cost money to build the infrastructure there. New infrastructure, once it's in, is going to have a low maintenance cost.
Okay.
The new facility is probably, the newer it is, the more revenue it's going to produce. So you're going to have a very low cost here with the infrastructure, and the highest revenue probably you're going to get from it. And through the years, they'll balance out. But in order to grow, we have to have that revenue. So because the only, in Oklahoma, you don't get any property taxes from municipalities. The only way that you can fund anything is through sales tax and cost of services and fees. So it's kind of a chicken or egg,
Sure.
And I would prefer to grow. I would prefer to increase revenue through growth than through additional taxation. The problem is where we are right now. That's not an option.
Right.
We're going to do everything we can to grow, but it's not going to give us an immediate return until something's done. So we need the tax money in order to work on what we have, because the growth in the outside growth isn't guaranteed. The sales tax is. We want to get more people here. We want to get more shopping and quality of life issues here. We want to get more jobs here. Okay? That is going to take more infrastructure than what we have, because we don't have housing for people right now. The ammunition depot is putting on 200. They could actually double that in a short period of time. The Choctaw Nation is investing $36 million in a manufacturing plant. They are going to have to be hiring people. Our current unemployment is anywhere from 4.5% to 6%. 4.5% is unemployable. Right? We don't have the people to fill the jobs that are going to be available. So we have to get people here, and the way to get people here is to build places for them to be. So yes, we need to invest money in what we have, and we're doing that downtown, and we're doing everything we can for organic growth, but we also have to have new growth as well, and that does cost money, but it also produces money, and my opinion, I think the benefit outweighs the cost.
I guess I have kind of some follow-up on that. I'd certainly agree that a piece of our strategy going forward on kind of figuring out the revenue cost problem we currently have is certainly new growth. New growth, especially productive growth, is certainly something that we're looking for. But there are things that we're working on to help remedy the cost issue of it. Not necessarily drop the cost down, but find a way of utilizing what's already there. Mm-hmm. If we can build more houses on vacant property within the McAlester city limits and not have to build out a new subdivision, we're obviously correct, infill. It doesn't solve the problem next year, but within 50 years, we don't have a new subdivision that we have to maintain.
Right.
One way that we're addressing that is our existing codes. So currently, to build a house, single-family residence, you have to have a 6,000 square foot lot. Not an overly large lot, but there are situations where depending on what area of McAlester you're at, but certain parts of McAlester, the lots aren't 6,000 square feet. Now, if a house is already there, great. But what happens if a house gets tore down or burns down? You can't rebuild on it. It makes a lot of our lots unusable. If we were to reduce that, and we're trying to figure out what that magic number is, because we don't want this to become a can of sardines.
No minimum.
But if we can find the number where we could reduce the lot size and maybe squeeze in houses a little bit more, or rebuild where there was an existing house, sure, yeah, we might be able to increase our population size without having to rely on building out new infrastructure that would have to maintain. To kind of go a little further on that, I don't want to say this number and anyone think that this will be the number that it goes with. But we looked at
saying this will be the number.
No, I'm not. I am not the planning director, and I do not pretend to be. But if we were to drop the required square footage for a lot from 6,000 to 4,500, it frees up 200 parcels in McAlester for houses to be built on. That's a big number.
Yeah.
So
and
we are.
Jamie's going to fact check you on it.
Well, Jamie was the one that was kind of walking through these and trying to figure out where that magical line is, and we don't know yet.
Sure.
This is definitely a moving target for what we're wanting to do, but we are trying to find ways of addressing that. Right. Is there a magic bullet that solves all of this? No. It's going to become, our strategy on moving forward is going to be mixed. It's going to be require some new.
You gotta have both.
It's going to find a way of addressing what we have.
Hitting the other side of the coin from one another. You know, you're talking about the need for more revenue, and you're saying basically we can do better with the revenue we've got with some shifting around of codes or whatever else that may be.
Well, I mean, let's
I'd go and I would go resources instead of revenue on that because
yeah.
Okay, fair.
And to kind of even go one step further than that, not just the lot size, but we're always talking about redeveloping Choctaw, and I'm definitely on board with that, and I want to do my what piece I can on that. But honestly, Choctaw is going to be one of the easier ones to redevelop because the structures are all here.
Right.
Now, admittedly, rehabbing some of these buildings and doing the sprinkler systems and all these different code compliances is going to cause some friction.
Sure.
There's going to be some costs associated with that. That's difficult. But if we look between Choctaw and Wyandotte, half of that is parking lot.
Right.
Now we're talking about if we really wanted to redevelop it, we're talking about building new structures and trying to conform those with our new building codes with how they were built previously.
Sure. And what's around them.
And what's around. I think that's going to be a bigger challenge. It's going to require us to really look at how our codes are applied and how we do that, specifically with parking requirements.
That's a good point.
So we are trying to find ways of being more efficient, but we won't get there without some new growth.
There are a lot. I mean, living here, there are a lot of empty lots that you can't do anything with. I mean, literally because they don't meet that.
yeah, we need that, but we also need we need revenue producing. We need market rate apartments. We don't have that. We need both TIFs because they will help us with some of the things that need to be done as far as Kirk was talking about from Choctaw to Wyandotte because there is available places there to expand and do well, but it's as you referred to a minute ago, we need both, and when we look at doing something, we don't look at what it's going to do immediately. Exclusively, we do look at what it's going to do immediately, but we also want to see what it's going to be 20 years down the road. So we're not acting capriciously whenever we're doing economic development at any level. We're balancing out what's going to give the best return for the effort and the money.
And what's sustainable.
Yeah.
Right. Right. All right. You guys have any other follow-ups for infrastructure?
I think this is the first one that we all kind of really collaborated on.
Tag team. You guys are finally getting the hang of it, and now, by the end,
Well, I know what I think when you really look at it. When we talk about numbers and talk about costs and looking out for grants. I mean, right now in Oklahoma, our government's operating with a $900 million deficit. Our federal government is $19 trillion in debt right now. And what has that meant for McAlester right now? For the last 10 years. If we're going to get anybody to invest in our community and our infrastructure and our hospitals, it's got to be us because it's not happening anywhere else. Drive to Oklahoma City and ask them where McAlester is on their list of priorities, or Washington, D.C., or wherever you want to go outside of McAlester. Right here, the people here have got to...
How many votes do you have?
That's exactly right. There's something like 70% of the population of Oklahoma lives within 20 miles of Oklahoma City and Tulsa.
Sure.
So the big division that happens in Oklahoma City and the legislature isn't between necessarily Republicans and Democrats, wealthy and non-wealthy. It's urban, it's rural and urban, and we're considered rural.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
And if not us, who's going to do it?
Yeah.
All right, Kurt.
Not us, who? If not, let's start a chant.
All right, we're going to move on to economic development with Kirk Ridenauer, our economic development director, and I'm going to shimmy these around for you.
I understand.
I think the first one, first one I think I'm going to ask is, what is the city's definition of economic development?
Sure, and that's really possibly the hardest question on here because literally everything is economic development because everything's tied to the economy. Historically speaking, economic development is usually associated with job creation and wealth building in your community. But really, when you look at all of these different initiatives that you could take for economic development, it really all boils down to one thing: quality of life. So for me, economic development is activities that enhance the quality of life for your residents. It can be new jobs. It can be helping small businesses grow or expand. It can be that wealth generation that's not necessarily creating jobs but bringing more wealth into your community. It could be activities that simply just enhance the quality of life. Like some things we're doing downtown won't necessarily create jobs or create a lot of revenue, but it may make the community more appealing to people. And I think all of those things are economic development. It's the reason schools are. Having a quality school in your community enhances the quality of life. Having a hospital enhances the quality of life.
The demand for good teachers, the demand for physicians, the demand for the care and services.
And an educated, prepared workforce eventually.
Now, that does create problems. So that means even though everything is economic development, what are you going to focus on? There are definitely, you have to reel that back and determine what pieces you're going to kind of go after. But it's kind of wide open, and from community to community, it will vary what your strategies are.
Well, and so that's your definition of economic. You said, to me, it's this.
Yes.
Historically, is that the way that McAlester approaches it? Is that a kind of a mind shift from McAlester?
Mm-hmm. And I think we're kind of going into your other questions here. So, and I can't speak for all economic development programs, especially for how it's been for the past. But since I've been here, which has been 4 years, it has shifted. So when we first got here and we first started, it was really kind of a new approach to economic development. They brought it in-house. They created an economic development department, and they hired 2 people, Leroy and myself. When we first started, I think that our approach was what a traditional economic development approach was, kind of the newspaper headlines recruiting a large industry. Ideally, it was
RFPs, a bunch of RFPs.
Correct. It was what each community wants to see, the Amazon locating in your community, the one job or the one project that's going to create 700 jobs or whatever. And that's kind of how we operated for a couple of years, because we definitely see the advantages of McAlester, and we thought that we could market them in a way that would be able to attract those large companies. And what we found out is, even though McAlester, and I still believe this, even though we do have a lot of advantages as far as industrial recruitment goes, we're not necessarily unique in a lot of ways. And it made it very difficult. It's highly competitive, and it made it very difficult for us to stand out from not only other communities in Oklahoma, but other communities across the nation. Because when you're talking about relocating a major project, it can happen anywhere.
Right.
And they are tens of thousands of
offers.
Communities. Yes.
Right.
So
well, this city said we can have free everything, and they'll build the building for us.
Correct.
And,
Correct. Now it's not. They don't necessarily jump right to the incentive, because, like I said, there are a list of things they need. They'll weed out the community. So workforce is usually number one. If you don't have the workforce, they may look at 1,000 communities, and they'll remove the bottom 900 that don't have the workforce that they need. Oftentimes that is McAlester, because depending on the company, they're looking at the Tulsa or Oklahoma City, the large metro region that have those engineers and those chemists and skill sets that we haven't fully developed yet. So over those first couple of years, we noticed that despite our best efforts, we may be able to get a company to even do a site visit. That was a win for us, was just to get a company in to look at McAlester. But we didn't land a lot of industries. Which we didn't land any large industries in those 4 years. And it kind of caused, for me at least, it caused me to kind of reevaluate what we wanted to do. Obviously, if I had the preference between large and small projects, I'd rather do a large one if I can get it, because I think that creates a bigger impact. Because surprisingly, whether it's a large project or a small project, the time commitment to get that in seems to be about the same.
Right.
But I've kind of shifted my gears, and I'm starting to think, well, maybe we need to see how can we grow, either help people start up businesses or help those existing businesses grow, because so far that's been our only wins. When you exclude MacApp, because it's kind of its own thing.
Right.
But Krebs Brewing Company, that is our flagship economic development project, not only in terms of the size, but just in the way that we structured that and the win that we get from it. So for those who are not familiar with that, Krebs Brewing Company was wanting to do an expansion, and we were able to help partner with them on that. It wasn't just the city of McAlester. We managed to get, I know that there aren't many grants available through the state, but this is one that is. If a company is creating quality jobs, ones that are above a certain pay threshold, we are able, as a city, we're able to apply through the state and receive funds.
Right.
We were able to receive the maximum amount for the grant, which is $1 million. We used that, we put in $100,000 of city money, and we bought a building, which we are now leasing back to him. We also managed to help him secure his capital equipment. He needed some collateral to help that because this equipment, the amount of equipment it takes to fill a 50,000 square foot building is a lot. So we took $250,000, put it in the form of a CD, and deposited it into a bank to serve as collateral to help him secure the loan he needed to get his equipment. To qualify for the grant, he had to create 30 jobs, and I certainly believe he's going to create that in the time frame he's got. But this is the type of project where, as he continues to grow and expand, it's going to go well beyond the initial 30 jobs. Right. And that's, if I could do that project every year, I certainly would.
Well, yeah, and with that, you've got somebody from here and a business from here in an industry that's, you know, international, and you have a tie here. You don't have somebody who is only here because they moved here because you had a good incentive package or whatever, and maybe they've grown beyond that, and now they're looking around for someone else. The
risk element is certainly there. When you recruit someone in, they have no real loyalty to your community other than them being able to produce a profit, which is important for every business. Right. But if you help a local business grow, they have roots here, and they're certainly more likely to stay within your community.
There's more reason for them to be here.
So as much as I would love to spend the same amount of time and recruit the 300-person industry, having any growth at this point is certainly, I would prefer to recruit 5 or to help grow 5 jobs than to try to recruit 300 and get nothing.
Okay. You've kind of covered several of these, and I realize we sort of skipped over where you say, hey, here's what we want to do with that.
Sure.
I'm going to ask it in the form of question 3. Is the 1/8 cent that you guys have on the ballot enough to make a difference with any kind of economic development, or is it plugging leaks with fingers? So let's talk about that 1/8 cent. What is the proposal there, and is it enough to make a difference?
There's never enough money. Same thing with infrastructure. There's never going to be enough money to do everything you want to do.
Economic development is everything. It's our budget for everything.
Yes, but it depends on what you scale your expectations to. If we are trying to be the city that has the war chest necessary to recruit that 500-person company, 1/8 of a cent probably isn't going to be enough. It's going to generate 500.
Pretty sure we.
There are other limiting factors there.
We might not have the workforce for Amazon.
We could get every living person in the county to work at Amazon, and we'd still be about 5,000 short. But if we kind of tailor our expectations to based upon, well, first what our budget is, and second what do we want to do as a community, it certainly can have an impact. So can we recruit the big company that's going to require tens of millions of dollars with an 1/8 cent? No. That's going to generate about $500,000 a year, which is more than the $90,000 a year we're getting now.
Right.
So that's one thing we might want to explain. So even though we currently have 1/4 cent dedicated for economic development, which is one of the 1/4 cents that's expiring.
It's expiring, right.
This
wouldn't be on top of that.
It would not be on top. It's expiring, and admittedly, that does generate $1 million a year. But it was bonded 15 years ago whenever it was first established.
The revenue now is just servicing debt.
Most of it is. Of the $1 million, about $910,000 is servicing debt. We get $90,000 a year. For a town of 20,000 people, we have an economic development program of $90,000 a year.
And a credit card bill.
Now, we do have $3 million in the bank, which sounds like a lot of money until you realize that these projects cost millions of dollars.
Right.
So, one of our problems right now and that we're going to be getting into what I would like to do with it. So one of our problems is our industrial park isn't well developed for industrial recruitment or expansions, whatever your strategy is. We have about 200 acres that is either not accessible by road or just simply is a hillside that needs to be leveled off. We don't really have a flat site in our industrial park. We thought that might be some low-hanging fruit early on when we were kind of in that industrial recruitment mindset. We thought there might be some low-hanging fruit if we took one site that was the flattest, which is right now about a 25-acre site in our industrial park, and thought, well, let's just go ahead and level it off and make it site ready. That's kind of the typical in industry jargon to kind of say that you're ready to go. That site, 25 acres, to get it perfectly flat, is $1.5 million. So our $3 million is not looking so big at this point.
Yeah, sure.
So I guess to kind of go back to it, is an 1/8 enough? It's enough to do certain things that can have an impact. Is it enough to do everything you want to do? No, it never will be enough.
Well, so on that note, then let's talk about the other two questions. What immediate plans would you have for economic development if the measure passes? And then the other one, what kinds of incentives can you offer or have you offered to local businesses to spur job growth? You kind of covered that with the QFI.
With the Krebs Brewing project,
Company, grant. And increased revenue coming into and staying in our community. In your opinion, how does this model compare to competing against almost every other city in the country to attract the small number of manufacturing facilities looking to build or relocate? You covered that. We
covered
as well.
a little bit of that, yes.
What are we looking at potentially doing with this?
Sure.
What's the wording in the actual proposition? What are your plans for it, hopes for it?
Yeah, I should have brought that. I don't know the specific wording, but there are kind of two approaches. So first, even though I said that I am trying to shift focus to look more at the local businesses and the existing industries and kind of helping them grow, that doesn't mean that we do away with recruitment. Sure. I mean, we always want to have that in our back pocket. When the opportunity's there, we strike. So to that effect, there's a few things that on the recruitment side that I would like to accomplish. The first one is not really a new thing. It's something we're currently doing, but I want to continue supporting MACAP, the ammunition plant. It is our largest industry, and it does have the most potential for a lot of job growth. So when we are talking about recruitment, that I do think is a valid opportunity, and I am trying to move in that direction. So that takes a couple of forms. One is we want to make sure that we continue to support or continue to advocate for the base whenever possible. We do the annual Stampede, where we go up to D.C. There's a group of us, about 15, across different organizations that go up to Washington, D.C., and we talk with our congressional delegation. We talk with key officials at the Pentagon. We make sure that MACAP stories are being told. I certainly want us to continue to be able to do that. That does take resources. Kind of to expand on that, though, from the recruitment side, I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to leverage the base and maybe recruit in some defense contractors that are already doing work at MACAP, but maybe could be doing more work. So maybe Raytheon's building a missile out there, and they have to load and pack it at MACAP, but all the other components of it are across the nation. Sure. Since we're the only place that they really have to be at, I'm certainly going to try to use that as a way of trying to get the other pieces to be assembled here in McAlester. Now that takes a location. Now, they could be at our existing industrial park, but ideally, we might be able to do a new industrial park, a defense sector industrial park adjacent to MACAP. A place where they would be able to assemble all the pieces or build all the pieces that they needed and then literally just take it across the fence line and assemble it all together. So those are two things that and of course, building out another industrial park takes resources. Sure. So those are two things that I'm wanting to do on the recruitment side. Again, I talked about our existing industrial park, the challenges associated with it. I do want to put some money into it. We're not going to be able to completely deck out the entire industrial park. We can't flatten the entire thing.
Let's not spend the war chest on dirt.
Correct. But there are some low-hanging fruit there that we might be able to do. There is a gravel road that goes to the backside of our industrial park that I think could open up some additional land. Were we able to put an asphalt overlay on it of some kind? I think that is some low-hanging fruit that we could grab or that we could do that would help both with recruitment and local expansions. One thing that we do is we do go to trade shows, and this is definitely the mentality, the previous mentality when let's double down and find that big industry. And we went to both retail trade shows, and we also went to some industrial trade shows. Normally, or most notably, the SHOT Show, the Shooting, Hunting, and Outdoor Trade Show. We went to that twice with limited success. One year we actually managed to get a company to come back to McAlester and do a couple of site visits. But I do think that we want to find some trade shows that aren't quite as costly, some local ones that we still might be able to continue to reach out to companies and make sure they're aware that we exist. Right. But I want us to target those dollars on those trade shows that are low cost. Which, not that the SHOT Show is the most expensive trade show in the world, but I don't know that we got our value out of that. The first year I think that we did, but the second year we didn't, and that kind of made me not necessarily want to go again.
Sure.
That's the recruitment side. What about the local expansion side? A problem with, and this is true of all economic or most economic development programs I'm aware of, is we're really good at evaluating big deals. So whether it's a shopping center that's coming in or an industry that's coming in, they know how to speak our language. Yeah. We're going to create this many jobs at this wage scale, this total payroll. We're going to have this capital expenditures. what can you do for us? And we can plug those into models and see what the local
You
effect
said
is
there's
going to
models
be.
for those.
We can find out, we can do our due diligence and find out what our return is, and we can offer an incentive that's appropriate to that return. It's really hard for us to do that with local business, with small business.
Sure.
If a restaurant owner comes to me, someone that's either wanting to start one or expand one, and say, hey, I need some help. I've got a really great idea for a restaurant. What can you do? Well, I don't know. How many jobs are you creating? I don't know. I mean, what's your capital expenditures? I don't know. I need a new stove. They're not really good at speaking our language. And it makes it really hard for us to provide incentives in that regard, because I can't plug I don't know into a model. And in some cases, it's not necessarily, it's not true that they need incentives. Sometimes they just need technical assistance, which again, I'm probably not the best person to talk to every business in the community. I can focus on certain ones of them, but I can't cover everybody. So what I would like to do is partner with the Oklahoma Small Business Development Center, statewide agency, and Mayor, I'll be approaching the council with this hopefully sometime in the next couple of months. But I would like to hire someone for the Pittsburgh County area. Eastern Oklahoma State College has actually hired someone for the Latimer County area, and she does service Pittsburgh County as well as she can. But I think that we need someone dedicated here in Pittsburgh County whose primary focus is literally just providing that technical assistance to small businesses, who that's what they dedicate their time to do.
Sure.
Helping businesses with their accounting or with marketing or creating a business plan or doing an expansion or anything that's typically businesses are really good at the operational side of things. I know I brew coffee. I know how to brew coffee.
Right.
I don't know necessarily how to do the finance side thing, how to hire employees, how to do all those other things that really aren't what I thought of when I was trying to start a business. So I want to hire a person for the entire county that does this, and I'd like to use it as a way to actually get more participation from those communities that are in Pittsburgh County that right now aren't doing economic development. So I would like to form a kind of an alliance almost with some of these other communities that don't have their own economic development programs, but who, because they are part of our county, are really influenced by McAllister's economy, and we're influenced by them. People in the surrounding communities do their shopping here in McAlester, so we are interested in making sure that they have high incomes as well. A lot of them
do their working here too.
A lot of them work here. We want to make sure that that everyone in the county does rise, because we are all interconnected. So I certainly think having that technical advisor is going to be important, and that's a reoccurring cost. That would be something that happens every year. So if this fails and we have a limited budget that is slowly getting drained down, that's not something that we would be able to continue to do. I would actually like to think about doing some type of incubation program. So having a facility that, for those who do want to start a business but can't necessarily afford the rent associated with a new place, maybe they're just wanting to start an idea, having a location where they might be able to do that. I had a meeting today about the possibility of doing a kind of a food incubator, a certified kitchen where people who are involved in processing different types of food, who can't afford to build their own kitchen, could have a central location where they could do that.
Commercial food grade kitchen
Exactly.
for my cookies that I sell here, but I can't afford to build one.
Exactly.
I need it, 30 minutes a week.
And sometimes it might be something simple, where the grandma's wanting to create some cookies. It might be a caterer, or we might have the next Lavera's that's wanting to do a really neat craft product that would become a huge industry.
Sure.
And they just need a place to start.
To find out.
It'd be a low-cost way to find out. So I'm wanting to do something along those lines. Cool. A loan guarantee fund. That's something that I've spoken about before, and I certainly want to get off the ground. I don't know whether it's city specific or county specific. There's more grants available at the county level than at the city level. But a lot of the times there's, again, going back to this idea that they may not necessarily, a business that's wanting to start up may not necessarily need an incentive, but they may not have the financing necessary to start their business. It's kind of the approach we took with Krebs Brewing Company, where we didn't give him $250,000. We essentially put $250,000 up as collateral to help him secure a loan. What if there was a trust fund, whether it be community or county specific, or county the regional area that it serves? What if we had a trust fund that allowed us to partner with those businesses that we want to see start, but aren't necessarily huge return, a business that we couldn't put an incentive in, someone that's not someone that's only servicing themselves, or they're not really, or only creating a job for themselves. It's not necessarily something we could go and put an incentive in. Right. Here's $10,000 for you, but maybe we could say, hey, we'll help offset some of the risks. Maybe the bank's not willing to loan it to you because you don't have the collateral. Right. Maybe we can help offset some of that risk and give the necessary collateral to get you going. That also gives us the unique advantage of being able to leverage more dollars than what we currently have. Right. So if we're only providing the collateral and the bank's providing the other 80%, that really helps. It helps kind of expand what you can do as a community. It allows you to have a much larger impact than what just your trust fund is. I don't know exactly what that'll look like, but that's something I want to see. I also think that we need to start thinking about doing an annual entrepreneurial fair of some kind, where people who do have ideas can kind of come together and showcase those ideas for the community, and possibly
like Shark Tank.
Well, that's actually what that's specifically what I thought of, and that's what I had when I describe it. I say Shark Tank, but this idea where all of these different.
Oh, can I be on the panel?
Chad is looking forward to this.
Well, no, I think it's a great way of people getting their name and their ideas out there, but also a potential fundraising opportunity where not only local banks would obviously want to be involved with this, or regional if we're expanding the area that we're trying to recruit entrepreneurs from. But also kind of give a way of the community to back these ideas. What if what if this trade show had some type of attendance fee where you buy a $10 ticket and that ticket's your vote? Yes. And we essentially can crowdfund. Everyone kind of vote for what idea you like the best, and we crowdfund one or two of the ideas that the community wants to see.
Right. Yeah, it's the same idea as the incubator, where the cost barrier is pretty low.
It's pretty low.
And in addition to potential fundraising, you also get somebody with an idea in front of other people who maybe have the rest of the funding, or who want to partner or something like that.
Whether we collect an eighth of a cent or a quarter of a cent or a half cent, the way we're going to be successful is by leveraging the assets of the community. Economic development is not the responsibility of one person or one department. We all do have to pitch in on this. So we need, and I'll admit that we can do a better job than we have been doing, and I certainly intend to do a better job than we have been doing about building those collaborative relationships between the entities that already exist. Sure. Now, as for what are the things that will actually get funded, I have no idea. Those are some things that I want to do. Which ones will materialize sooner than others, I can't tell you. Sure. And how much will those cost? I can't tell you. What opportunities will be? What opportunities will happen in the future? Whether it's a week from now, a month from now, or a year from now, I have absolutely no idea. Right. And I know that makes it hard for a lot of people when they're voting for this. Well, what are you actually doing? I get that. I really do. And that's what economic development is you're voting for future opportunities.
I've always thought of economic development as like a down payment for success. Because you don't, you know what I mean? Because you don't, if you want to buy a house, you can't just, the bank's not going to loan you all the money. You want to go buy a car, you want to do most anything worthwhile. People want you to have some skin in the game before they give you the rest of it. Mm-hmm. So when you have something in the kitty, you have some skin in the game, like the city of McAlester, what we can put a down payment for, it's a lot easier for people to, to fund the rest of it, or to commit to the rest of it, but they want to see something first. Mm-hmm. And that's what's tough, is because when you don't have a dedicated revenue source, you have no money for the down payment. I mean, I'd love to have a $500,000 house, and I'm sure the bank would say, I'd love 20% down. You know what I mean? And they would give me the other 80, But I've got to come up with a down payment first. Right. I've got to find a way to have a revenue source to do my part first. Right. And that's what I feel like economic development is a way for our community to have our part first when that opportunity comes. Because I've in my personal life, I've had to pass on a lot of great deals because I wasn't in the right place, financially, to take advantage of it. And those opportunities have probably came and went from McAlester because we haven't been in the right place to take advantage of the opportunity.
Sure, yeah. I think it's the same ethos that's behind like the downtown TIF thing, in that what exactly are we going to fund with this? How much are we going to get from it to fund something? What's it going to cost? Like, I'm not really sure, but it's more the idea that we believe in the premise of investing in this area.
Let's do
Investing
something.
with this philosophy. Yeah.
That's
Dude,
exactly-
let's start somewhere.
It's an investment account. You're going to have this money to invest in wherever you are going to get the best return.
Right.
So, and that's
Believing that it's a good, that this could lead to good returns.
And I've not seen a lot of communities though that have been more willing and put more effort and energy to try to hear the voice of the people than what I have in McAlester in the last year and a half, 2 years. I mean, just a constant collaborative effort by every agency to say, come and tell us what you think. Come and tell us what you want. Come and tell us, and I mean, we've got it. We need to respond. I mean, me as a taxpayer, and a voter needs to respond to say, no, you guys want to do it, and let's start somewhere.
Right.
And as an indicator of the community, what businesses are looking at, if they see that we're supporting our economic development as we should, then that's something that's favorable for McAlester when businesses are looking at
Absolutely.
whether or not they want to come
The
here.
community are going to make it a priority.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to get out and vote, and
Care about
people care. Apathy
Business
kills
is gonna
people,
look at the
kills
business
communities.
of McAlester.
That's
And
right. All right. Anyone else? Feedback or thoughts or questions for Kurt? Did you cover everything?
Are you
I
going
think
to,
so.
if we do get a Shark Tank panel, can I at least interview to be on the panel?
Yeah.
I can't guarantee that. I'll let you interview, but I can't guarantee that it's going to be an official capacity.
He's gonna be that guy in the first row just yelling.
Yeah, this weird guy keeps coming by and asking me questions. I don't know what he wants.
Awesome.
Most important thing is get out and vote. I mean, we all obviously want all of these to pass, but we really want people to participate in democracy first and foremost. It works better if people participate, if we get your opinions, and you support what you want to support. You guys are the ones that define what the city is going to be, what the hospital is going to be, what the school system is going to be. We're just the conduits for putting the measures in place that you tell us that you want to do. So please get out and vote. I personally am going to vote yes on all 4 of them. I would encourage everyone else to do that. But whatever you do, just vote.
Get out and vote. Thanks for watching. Join us next time. See you then.
Will this be titled John Loves Voting?
It's got to be hates. It's got to be somebody hates something. We'll figure it out. John hates Fair and Balanced News.
There you go.